welcome back to another episode of the ADH Dads. I'm your host, JJ.
And I'm CJ.
Hey, buddy, how's it going today? What are you up to today? How are things in your world? I'm curious.
Oh man, I got all three kids home from school sick, snotty noses. So, fevers are being ran here. So it's always a challenge to try to get work done in such an environment. But kids have actually been really helpful. When I come into these moments, I just lean into them. So the kids have been helping me with some of my work and some of my artwork and stuff. So it's been a good couple of days, man. How you been? What's new in your world?
Oh, Cohen has been with his mom for the last couple of days. We're actually doing something we haven't done in a long time, and that's switching up his schedule because one thing I've been very proud of him recently is his ability to articulate things in a greater detail and more emotional attachment to those things. What does that look like in this moment? Well, he said to me and he said to her the same or something similar where, we co-parent awesome. And Cohen is somebody who basically is the recipient of a lot of the decisions in co-parenting. He explained to me last week that he doesn't like going such long periods between seeing his mom and seeing his dad. So he said both to me and to her, I just don't like that I have such a long period without the other parent. And man, is that something you want to listen to? Oh, for sure. What does that do for his emotional health going forward? Well, we're now into a period of changing that up a little bit. There's a couple of exceptions. Every Tuesday night, I do a coaching call for guys in kind of similar situations to my own or who are going through divorce. Just essentially, a group that meets to kind of talk about life and where they're at, and lean in if they need to lean in with any of their issues or to celebrate each other. So yeah, that's something that's near and dear to my heart, and she works with me on that for his schedule. So luckily, we're going to still be sticking to Tuesday nights. He'll be with her, and then she has work stuff here and there on Wednesday nights. So we're gonna adjust to those things, but the schedule will change a little bit, and that's based on our kid, his development. And another big highlight recently is that he's been very good in terms of his social development, which we're very proud of because it's been a lot of egocentrism for quite some time with him. And, that's part of growing up. And sometimes that's also a delay in ADHD kids. And I think he's experiencing both of those things, growth and his ADHD kind of keeping him wrapped up in his space a little bit more. But we also practice moments of curiosity with him in a way that's helpful for him to slowly develop that circle around him. So while he's keeping people close, he's also still kind of, exploring what it is that they experience in their minds. We're still in the early stages of that, but I'm really excited to kind of dive into that as we move forward here. So I guess with that, having said that, I'm just curious, what are some of the things that you're hoping to talk about in today's episode?
Curiosity. You're curious, are you? That's perfect because that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about curiosity, man, and how I've kind of found that this has really been a superpower for me in communication with my wife and with my kids. So yeah, I want to kind of talk about, what questions we can ask and how we can ask them, and, how can we reserve a little bit of our opinion or state of fact to try to gather a little bit more information and practice some empathy. So yeah, man, it sounds like you practice some good curiosity with Cohen there, man. That's pretty wild, and I'd like to applaud you and your ex there, because what a safe environment that you've created that he can come to you and express those thoughts. Because I'm thinking about when I was a kid and wanting to go back and forth between my parents, or those conversations were very intimidating, and there was a lot of anxiety and pressure on me as a kid that I didn't feel comfortable enough expressing that. So I think that that's pretty cool. And he's got some really great awareness and communication, and you've got some great curiosity there to pull that out of him. So that's a great example of what we're going to get into today.
Oh man, what a nice compliment. Thank you very much, buddy. And I appreciate you also sharing that about your childhood, because that makes me think about this idea of curiosity. What we're talking about is, when we are so little, and the world is just becoming something that we're trying to understand. There's just a great deal of curiosity taking place constantly, at the various earliest stages. We're just simply trying to, use our hands and our eyes to figure out what everything means. And so basically we're creating memories at any given moment, pretty much all moments. And those are more often than not, when you're in a safe environment, when you're that young, it's positive interaction. So you're really absorbing a lot of good things. And then what happens when you start to develop that language skill set? You want to explore that. You want to communicate. You want to figure out, how do I do this to talk to others, to connect with them, because we're social creatures. It's vital to our lives to be social. So when kids start to ask questions, and they maybe even express their emotions through questions and curiosity, it's such a valuable thing to foster that and to really support that in them. And then somewhere along the lines, that egocentrism starts to show up a little bit in our kids, or that fear. And sometimes we parents, we lose the interest in being curious in return. So we more or less suggest that our kids are, they're an obstacle to getting to where we need to go. And then we kind of shut off that curiosity, whether it's in, something that they're going to shut off because of how we approach and respond to them, or because of their fear, or what have you. We're just too busy. So we can sometimes put them in a state of compromise by not allowing that curiosity to continue. Yeah, kids will ask a lot of questions, but my goodness, think of how much that brain is active in those moments. And if we reward them with that dopamine effect, where they're getting so much from that's just going to expand their world so much more in so many good, positive ways. Their emotional capacity and intelligence grows from that as well. So, man, your early memories and stuff, they stick with you, and in some ways that shut you down, and that was hard, I'm sure, through relationships that you wanted to continue to expand upon. And I just love that you and we talk about this a lot, where we give that both directional communication with our kids. Although I will say, on my behalf, sometimes I'm guilty of shutting down my son's curiosity, because I found, oh, I've got about 400 things to do in the next couple days, and I get anxious for that. But I got to move past that, buddy. One thing I want to talk about in this episode is, like you said, fostering that curiosity, and really supporting our kids through it.
Man, I get it. It's hard sometimes when you've got, kids, you got to get out to the door and you're running late for the thing. And the one doesn't want to wear socks and the other one can't find her other shoe. And the other one just doesn't want to go. It's hard to navigate. Sometimes you just want to not ask questions and you just want your thing as the adult, as the responsible one who's in charge of getting you there on time and everybody there safely. You just want to be able to roll through nice and easy, but it doesn't always happen like that. And I think that the more that we go without being curious in these moments, or pausing to see what's going on emotionally with our kids, they fall into these rabbit holes of, I'm not getting enough attention, or they're starved for it, so they start lashing out in other ways. I just had a really neat example of a father fail that I turned into a win. If you would like to hear, if you're curious.
Oh, I'm incredibly curious about this. You already sparked up a bunch of thoughts in my head with what you've already said, so I'm looking forward to hearing more, man. I'm curious. Let's hear about this win. A failure to a success is one of the most beautiful things of parenthood. So here we
Well,
are.
we'll start with the failure, because sometimes we don't always have the proudest moments as parents, but I think that there's still some really great opportunity there for some growth between you and the kid and your relationship with your kid. But so anyways, we were having a day yesterday with all kids homesick, and I was trying the negotiating bribing tactic when I was setting them up for alone time, trying to get some work done. And I said, okay, if you guys don't come down for alone time and you clean your room at the end of that, I'll give you a piece of candy. Well, they didn't clean their room. They came down several times during alone time, and I was still going to give them the candy, for the coming down, but the room cleaning, I needed her to take care of it. It was so bad you just couldn't walk through it. And I'm just like, I come from an OCD stepmother who taught me the cleanliness, procedure, and it's in my bones, man. I've tried to just like be okay with the mess, and I need it. I need it. I need it clean. So anyway, she comes down and she says, I'm not going to clean the room. Aubrey's taking a nap. She's sick. She's not going to help. So I'm not going to do it. I said, don't worry about it. If she's not going to help, but you will still get your reward, and she said, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to wake Aubrey up. I said, no, don't wake her up. Don't wake Mama up. Mama was homesick from work too. So she's in there sleeping and trying to navigate that and keep the house quiet, and she runs upstairs and stomp, 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 making as much noise. And this has been a habit lately with our oldest, and these big displays of emotion or anger when she's told no specifically. And she just needs to make it known, and she needs to externalize it, and she needs to be demonstrative about it. And we've been seeing that show up more frequently over the last few weeks. So she's stomping up the stairs to go in the room, and I look on the camera and she's over there shaking little sister awake, so I kind of get mad. I yell, Naomi, I told you not to do that, and I go up there and I say, all right, no candy, we're done with the candy. The reward is done. You didn't follow the rules, and she had a problem with that, starts stomping and making noise and displaying, and runs into Mama's room to tattle on Coley Colton, and Coley took my candy away and says that I can't have it now. And Mama just brushes her off and says, I'm not going to get into the middle of it, let me sleep. And then she comes out of the room. I said, okay, so now you've lost candy for 2 days because you woke Mom up. It was not as calm as I'm playing it back to you. It was at a raised volume, I'll be honest. And she started crying. I went downstairs, and oh man, the guilt just immediately filled me. I just made her cry, and so I went back up there and I said, Naomi, come talk to me. And no, I'm mad at you. And I said, well, let's use our words. Let's figure out what's going on. So we go down there and we had a really great talk. I apologized for raising my voice and told her that I don't want to make her cry, and I don't want her to feel like she's in trouble. I felt that with my special brain as a kid, I was just in trouble a lot, and there was punishments handed down, but not a lot of conversations around, different tactics or ways to go about whatever trouble I was in. So, and I was trying to explain this to her in the way that you do to an 8-year-old with not as many words. But, she seems to be really receptive. And, I told her I want her to feel safe in coming to me, and that she can tell me anything. And that if she does ever do something, in trouble, if she comes and tells me first before she gets caught, the consequence, there will be less, if not any consequences, and we'll have conversations about it. So, we moved past that moment. Later in dinner, she's told no again for whatever reason, and she starts stomping away. And I decided to practice a little bit of curiosity this time, instead of telling her no and stop that and don't do that and what we talk about and what did I say? I said, Naomi, I'm just kind of curious. I've been noticing that you have been doing these displays of anger lately. When you feel upset, you have to show it. You have to, let everybody know that you're upset. What's going on with that? And she said, I don't know, and just kind of brushed it off. And later that night after bedtime, she sneaks into her room and taps me awake. And she says, Coley, can you come downstairs and have a private conversation with me? So, okay. That was kind of interesting. She never pulls me aside for these one-on-ones, and my wife looks up at me like, what? So I go down there with her, and she says, remember what you asked me earlier at dinner time about why I show my anger the way that I do? I said, yeah. And she says, can we talk about that some more?
Oh, wow.
I said, yeah, okay. What's on your mind? And she says, well, I don't really know what to say. So can you start and then I can jump in? Like, what? That's like the most mature way to handle a conversation that I've had experienced in my adult life, let alone with an 8-year-old, So we just kind of got into it a little bit more. And I said, I used to be really big with my anger too. And, I felt as a kid that, if I maybe got that anger out, or if I just yelled it or just got it out of my body, it would make me feel better and calm down. I just needed to release it. And, is that how you're feeling? And she said, no. And I thought that was interesting too, because, gosh, as I was a kid and I was in trouble, I didn't know how to answer those questions. Why did you do that? Or, what's happening there? I don't know, until someone gave it a name. Well, was it because you did this? And then my little kid brain would be like, yeah, that sounds like a good reason. That's it, But she challenged me there. She said, no, that's not it. She said, it's, I think it's because I feel like I don't get a lot of attention. And I know that if I act really, really, really sad, you'll come over and try to make me feel better. And if I act really, really, really mad, you'll come over and try to calm me down. And God, we hear this in psychology talk all the time about why our kids are, acting out trying to get attention. But when she vocalizes it to you herself, it's like, wow. So I said, well, okay, honey, how about instead of yelling or screaming or stomping, how about you come over to me and you say, Coley, can I have a moment? And that will be our secret language, our secret cue. I will pick you up and I'll rub your back like I did today. And I'll ask you questions and I'll tell you how proud I am of you. She said, okay, can you tell Mama that too? I said, sure. That'll be our little secret code, And I just thought that it was just this beautiful moment. I was beating myself up. I yelled at her and scalded her and punished her and made her cry. And, I just decided to go back and see what that was about and tell her a little bit of my story and my perspective and asked her about hers. And though she didn't have the words to put a name to it right away, it was something that resonated with her, that she thought about, that she wanted to articulate, that she liked the way that I was articulating, and she wanted more of that in that communication. And, that curiosity just goes a long way, so it was a very proud moment as a dad, and to watch her go through that, and just very mature to see an 8-year-old kind of communicate that way and be so receptive to curiosity.
Yeah, what a great emotional intelligence display she provided to you there. And man, I mean that's powerful, because you see so much depth in a little human at that age. There's so much that they want to say, and there's so much that they're still trying to learn. And she operated in both of those ways with you, because for one, she was struggling with trying to figure out her emotional space, which of course that's one time or that's a time we see quite a bit with our kids. When we ask, why did you do that? Their emotions at that point are so imbalanced that their way of shutting down is an emotional response. Like, I'm not sure what to do here. I'm just scared. I'm sad. I'm not, I'm being, basically put on, on the stand, and I'm still trying to figure out what this relationship with this person is supposed to be in this moment. That's a lot for a kiddo, but for her to say to you, I would like for you to talk, because then it could honestly help me understand myself at a deeper level. That was that was a huge prompt from her, because she knew she had something within her, but she also needed for you to help her mine that out a little bit, so she could then give you something in return that helps you not only define yourself and give example of what you've experienced, but then she could further understand herself and maybe how it differs from your experience. Man, I mean, that's a beautiful exchange, man.
Yeah. And, you said something too that I think is pretty powerful. And it's that why I think we overuse that word a lot when we're trying to understand our partners and our kids. And I think that why is a very accusatory word. It's got a lot of power behind it. I feel like when you're asked that question, it can almost be demeaning. It can almost make you pause in a way that questions yourself, and you all of a sudden feel insecure because, well, what, why, I try to reframe the questions with, how could you, or what might you think is a better option, or, instead of just why, because I know I get
Well,
into trouble with that with my wife too. You know, I overuse that word.
A lot of the times when when it's said, why did you do that? It's anti curiosity. It's actually
Yeah, yeah,
focusing in on something that caused you, to lose control of yourself and your response to that, to the kids or to your partner. So you're not actually looking for the reasons behind their actions. You're looking to further kind of condemn what they did because you are upset about it.
yeah. A lot of times we ask why, and we don't want to know why the other person's why is, but we want to just tell them why not. You know, like we ask, well, why would you do that? When it's really in our head, it's like, well, let me just go ahead and answer, but I want to tell you why I wouldn't ever do that, or why I
Hmm.
think that's wrong. You know, whatever your why is, I've already got something packed up in here that I'm trying to get to you of why, why that's not a good enough reason.
Yeah. So if you were searching for an answer to our why question, what could we ask instead of why did you do that? Could we ask something, well, what were you thinking that led to this point of taking that action? Because now you're asking about the person and their choices and maybe where they were starting to lose sight of their emotions and then act it out. Now we're trying to get to the heart of the individual rather than to the action that they probably feel, regret and disappointment in themselves over. So when we go, why did you do that? We're showing them like, yes, you should be upset at yourself. You should feel bad about who you are. It's something that my kiddo will say to me sometimes when he's made a mistake, and maybe I've, again, just like you, maybe I first turned to the wrong approach to addressing it. Then he'll say, I just always seem to make mistakes. I do everything wrong. That's because
Yeah.
he was not given the opportunity to allow his true being to be, I guess, explored. Instead, I'm just going for, you did this wrong. I know you did it wrong, and let's talk about that because
Yeah.
now you're in trouble. Then the poor kiddos, everybody shuts down. I know we all experience that even in adulthood. We're little kids inside sometimes because we feel that same hurt and fear and shame and doubt as a result of how somebody addresses maybe something that we made a mistake over, or maybe they just didn't see something but they came at us, and that usually shuts us down. We don't know how to respond. Our emotional relationship with that person at that point is now in question. So we're fearful, and we also are kind of, in some ways trying to buy into what they're saying. Well, what is it about myself that makes these mistakes? Am I just stupid? But if we actually have somebody speaking and advocating for the person who's there, who actually wants to do good and wants to have a good relationship with us, which of course family, that's most often the case, then we see something greater if we get a question asked of our character and a curiosity approach to it, as opposed to again, like charging us.
Yeah, I think a better question than why did you do this is, what feelings were coming up for you when you made that
Mm.
decision, or, what was going through your head when you decided to do that. Again, that question can be accusatory if given in the wrong tone, but I think it is a better question than why did you do that. Um, so yeah, I think that those are a good question, especially for our kids who are still trying to figure out and name emotions, and label what's going on inside their head. I think questions like that, what were you feeling, are really important for our little ones, and for our spouses too when communicating that. I think it's really important for us to understand where the other person is coming from emotionally, um, as a factor of whatever decision they made, because I think that it gives us, the listener, a little bit more information and depth to understand what's going on. I think human beings as communicators, we just so desperately want to get our opinions across so quickly, and we do that before we've really asked all of the questions. And a lot of the times when we do that prematurely, we stick our foot in our mouth. And I, I say we, but I should be saying I.
When we come to a situation of conflict resolution, or we're trying to get through a moment that's difficult with our kids, um, again, if we go back to the why did you do that, and we essentially just create a punishment for them, we're not giving them the opportunity to understand themselves and their feelings, like you said. If you ask a kid who, my kiddo's 7, if you ask him, what were you feeling in those moments? He might say sad or angry, and maybe he doesn't really truly understand those emotions, those feelings. But now we've given him the opportunity to be curious about themselves and about the situation, and come back to that, and maybe pick it apart, and then come to, like what you experienced yourself, come to more understanding, because I'm now allowed the space to explore myself in those moments of hardship, because I am not fully aware of all the feelings, and my emotions got the better of me, as we might say. But we're allowing those emotions to be visited later in a safe space where we can talk about them, not instead, charge them with a crime and give them a punishment and then move on to the next time. We're instead saying, all right, this time matters. You matter. Your emotions in that moment matter, and they're real. Maybe the way you addressed it wasn't the healthiest, but let's talk about you. Let's talk about who you are, and why this particular thing mattered to you. And then you've got somebody who's like opening up the communication lines and the trust and stuff.
Well, God, I mean, you ask anybody, why they fight with their spouse, and I think most, if not all men would say, it's, I don't feel heard, or I don't feel validated, I feel misunderstood, or, all of these things revolving around communication and validation, and appreciation. And gosh, if we could handle conversations with a curious nature rather than a opinion, centered frame of mind, I think that we would get so much further in our relationships, and not just building trust with the other person, but, garnishing connection that's even deeper, because you're empathetic, you're curious, you're open, you're not trying to fix, you're just trying to understand. And I think that there's a real power in understanding, rather than trying to fix, you know. Again, especially with our kids too, because we're looking at it from an adult brain, and all of our experiences and all of our history and memories and all these things that have affected us all these years, and our kids are looking at it with these wide eyes, open world, experiencing everything for the first time, and that's
Hmm.
overwhelming, like you say, like, so we have to be able to ask the right questions in the right way to understand our kids' brains that operate significantly different than ours, and I think that that's a real miss that we miss as parents a lot of the times, is we just expect them to have that same train of thought, that same progression, that same intellect, and it's not there yet. And the way that we're going to get them there is by asking them the right questions, having them come to the answers, having them understand themselves better.
There's that saying, walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. That's something that I think is of utmost importance, because, like you said, with relationships, you'll have too often somebody, when they're in a state of crisis in their relationship, they start to say, well, I wasn't perfect, but, and then they lead into talking about the other person. So they're actually putting the other person's story in their complete control and ownership, instead of actually talking about, oh, well, I wonder about, well, she did this, she did that. Well, can you tell me a little bit about her intent and her thoughts and her feelings through that? Like, what was she actually feeling when she hurt you? What do you think was going on in her day that led up to this moment? Too often we just skip right to the end, like, oh no, I've been offended, and therefore I have reason to be upset. That doesn't dig deep. And then, with our kids, well, should we do that same thing to our kids? Should we just skip to the end and say they did all this, instead of fostering that environment of curiosity with them? Of course, we should do that same thing for them. So that can also, of course, help them further understand themselves as they go through, especially, like teenage years. Uh, figuring out the world around them and what their friends or their dating partners might be thinking on the other end. It's too easy for us to just kind of be, of course, we're the center of our own universe, to commit to only that perspective. It takes work, but the work is so much more meaningful and has greater outcome further on down the line when we practice that curiosity and we offer up that one thought to ourselves, that question to ourselves, like, well, what was it that they were thinking about? And better yet still is if you feel a moment of escalation in the moment with that person, being able to actually say, hey, I want to ask you about that. You seem like you're feeling a little frustrated with me or this, you know, what about that makes you feel frustrated? Because, even if they come back at us and say, well, you did that, then you can say, oh man, it sounds like what I did was upsetting to you in that way, and now we're here. What is it about that situation made you start to feel those feelings? You keep going back to the beginning, and then next thing you know, the person feels heard, they feel safe, and they lower their fists and instead open up most likely will open up a reciprocation where they start to ask questions too.
Yeah, I mentioned it on a podcast a few episodes ago, that I heard Jocko Willink on a podcast say that the cure to anger is curiosity. It's really hard to be angry when you're curious, instead of stating your fact or your opinion when you're asking questions. And man, that's just been sitting in my brain and rolling around, and a philosophy that I've been trying to really implement and incorporate in the last couple of months since I heard that. And I've had some really great successes with it too. My kids have been begging us for a yes day. We watched the movie, like 6 months ago, and the kids just want a yes day. They've been asking and asking and asking, and my wife is a little scared to go fully commit to that. I am too, honestly. But
yeah, I understand.
But I have done a few like trial runs with the kids when on days that it's maybe just been me and them on a sick day or something like that, where it's like low. I know that they're not going to ask to go to Disneyland or Six Flags. We're all sick. We know we're inside. Like it's going to be mostly house stuff. And I don't tell them that I'm doing this. I'll just yes everything. And, there's things that I don't want to do or that are unreasonable, that they're asking for. But I don't say no. I ask questions, and I try the more questions that I ask, the more information that I have to make my argument for a no without saying no. So, for point example, Naaman will say, well, I want to play with my toys, and then I want to go, bake this thing, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to get on my iPad for a little bit, and then I'm going to eat this thing. And, and I'll say, well, we only have until 3:30 before we need to go do the thing, and what is most important to you? What would you like to do first? Because I don't think that we're going to have enough time. Right. So if you had to pick some things, what would you rather do? And just, we can get to a no, and I'll just remind her, oh, well, you said that you wanted to do that one thing, right? You said that was important to you. So we already started that. So what's the rule? And then she'll tell me the rule rather than me going, the rule. The rule is to clean up every time you move a room or you're done with the project. I'll just remind her. I'll ask her, what's the rule? And oh, yeah. And then she'll do it herself. And I was just really surprised by the power of that, and how far I was getting. I'll tell you, a lot further than when I wag the finger in their face and I say no because I said so. A lot further, brother. It takes a little bit more practice and patience and a little bit more like mental gymnastics to think like, well, how am I going to phrase this in a question form? But also get my opinion. It takes a little bit of intellect and some muscle flexing, I'll tell you. But I think that that's a great practice to do for someone that's looking to harness better communication, and I think that we should handle 90% of our conversations should be this, and I think the opinions that we do offer should still be ended with a question. What do you think? Or what did you think about what I said? Or is that helpful? Or sorry, I'm getting animated hitting my microphone over here.
Well, I have a question for you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Piqued
earlier
my
in
curiosity.
the earlier in the episode, the example given was, hey, everybody's taking their time getting ready to go, but hey, school starts at this time. We still got to get out the door, and you got kiddo. You're like, hey, this each kid gets to has to get their clothes out and get dressed, and then you go and check on them, and they've maybe gotten one sock on, and they're just kind of looking around the room. How do you bring curiosity into that situation when you're under stress, you're under a time restraint, and you got to get moving?
Good question, JJ. For me, it's, what do you think your teacher would say if you didn't show up with socks today? Or, what is the nurse going to say when you have to go get a pair of socks because it's too cold today? Or, like, are you sure you're going to be okay with that? Because you're doing that one thing today, you're going to be in the dirt, or you're going to be getting pretty dirty today. Or last time you did that, your shoes got stinky and we had to throw them away. You don't want to ruin those shoes, do you?
Yeah.
See, I'm still getting that opinion in there, JJ.
Well, no, I really appreciate that stuff, and that, because there's a lot of directions you can go with it. For me, that sometimes I don't get much, indicator as to what is going on in my kiddo's head. But if he's just like dilly dallying to get his clothes on, sometimes I'll ask him, hey, seems like you're in thought, and maybe that'll spark a little bit of interest in him responding. And then I get something from him, and I say, well, that's cool. Let's maybe we'll say, hey, Google, remind us to do this at 5 p.m. and talk about this at 5 p.m. And then I've got a reminder in my Google, which is actually trying to record it right now while I'm talking to you. But then we can kind of move on to the next thing, where I say, okay, buddy, cool. Now we've got that reminder set. We'll talk about that later. Let's get those clothes on. Let's get moving. So his ability to still be himself in those moments isn't rejected. Instead, it's suggested, oh man, this is a great thing. We need to hold on to it, and we get to revisit it later. Something like that with those stressful moments, because man, we have them all the time with our kids. Those can really help them feel heard and seen, and then that also can spark the curiosity in them to practice that same method on somebody else.
Yeah, I think I've had a lot of success with that too. If I've noticed that the kids may be in an emotional moment and we don't have time to deal with the drama, because we're out in public or trying to get from point A to point B or whatever it is, the moments that I can still create that space, okay, well, why don't we walk to the car and I'll carry you and you can tell me what's going on. Or why don't you tell me what's going on in the car, and I'll listen to you. Or how about when we get to the place that we're going to, we'll sit down and I'll give you a hug, and whatever your routine is, or whatever your little bait, your little cookie is, but not just diminishing it, or we don't have time to deal with it, or don't feel that way, or that's where I think the resentment builds up, and the displays and the demonstrative displays of anger really get bigger and more needing of attention.
Speaking of needing of attention, my dog was scratching at stuff at my feet there, so I apologize for that, folks. I don't know what he's curious about. He doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah, I just just slowly lifted a cute dog into the frame.
So, I think we got a lot of good stuff out for, working with our kiddos and really practicing curiosity with them, and basically influencing their, relationships as they further on, navigate through school and just everyday social life. I guess what I would be really curious about is, how do we transition that into talking about relationships with our partners, and the massive complexities that they also bring to the table.
Yeah. One of the best books I ever read that changed my life was Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Man, that book is good. If you are looking for some good reading, listeners, definitely pick that book up. It will help you in your relationship and communication. And I just, as soon as I was done with that book, I started implementing it with my mechanic, with my wife, and it was just like, wow. Okay, like if done in the right way. And that book basically just talks about, being mindful of your tone of voice and your volume. He talks about going into the late night radio DJ voice, just smooth jazz all the time. You're just monotone and you're not getting loud. And he talks a lot about mirroring. So what your partner says in that communication, you mirror back to them. It sounds like you're upset. Labeling, it sounds like you're sad because of this. Do I have that right? And I think that, like, just practicing that curiosity with those tools instead of just, well, you need to do this, or, I hear that a lot in a lot of communication problems that couples have is, my wife was telling me this thing, and then I told her she just needed to do this. She needs to go take a day. And again, I think that just like that why phrase, you need to, can have a lot of accusatory implications to it, and I think a better reframing of that in the curiosity sense and what we're talking about would be, what do you think would help you? Or how would you like me to help you? Or how would you like me to support you? Do you just want me to listen, or would you like me to help you troubleshoot? And I think asking permission to give opinions, it can really go a long way. It can really go far in creating emotional safety with your partner, rather than just stepping in the middle of their sentence to interrupt them to state your opinion. You're curious, you're open-minded, and you want to know what's going on, and asking, again, just the comfortable level, or the comfortableness that your partner has with you giving the opinion, I think can really let her open up to your opinion as well.
Yeah, buddy. And one of the things that you just made me think about is it's practice, right? It's practice. Like, for example, the mirroring thing. You can essentially sound like a parrot, which could drive your partner nuts at first when you're beginning to understand how do I put this into practice. Say, I'm really angry at you. Oh, you're really angry at me? I mean, that could just that could just throw fuel on the fire, depending
Yeah.
on the type of person that you're dealing with. It's definitely something it's a learned skill, which is interesting that we say that because we're adults trying to bring that type of influence to our kids. How do we do that with adults? It does take a lot of practice. One of the huge breakthroughs that I've had in relationship is finding a way to tell the person a little bit about themselves before we present a question. So, you could say something like, I see we're experiencing a difference of opinion on how maybe some of the finances would be spent. Um, you have I can see in you have a great love for our kids, and when you are interested in spending the money in this way, I imagine there's a lot to that, and you're thinking about them when we make this decision. Is there something you'd like to tell me about that can help me better understand where you're coming from? Because I believe I understand a certain degree, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that. So advocating for that person, that relationship, by explaining yourself to them, that you actually know so many good things about them, and you want to highlight those things, followed up with that question. You're already given them that I guess that comfort, that trust building, leading up to, I need to figure something out with this situation.
Yeah, and the more questions that we ask, just the more information that we have, the more tools that we can help assist with. We really need to have that curiosity in order to not stick our foot in our mouth, like we're saying. Um, so yeah, what are some questions that you like asked to you when you're upset?
That I like asked of me.
Yeah, what's a question that you would hope for when you're upset?
Well,
How do you like it phrased?
Odd thing is there's not a lot of great examples from the last couple of years. Not because I figured it out, but because a lot of my interactions are generally with my kiddo. So he doesn't tend to ask me too many things yet. But I can say that one thing that would just bring me a lot of peace and comfort is at first an acknowledgement that, hey, I see you're upset. I can understand. why you might feel upset in this moment.
That
Um,
mirroring
yes, but
aspect we're talking about.
correct. And and then maybe highlighting some things about me that you notice, you recognize, you've paid attention to. I think I just mentioned that. And then then bringing that question. That's gonna make my shoulders not so tense. That's gonna help me relax, and it's gonna provide me with that space of being heard, or feeling like I'm gonna be heard. So I've got that safety and security with that person who's at first not just coming at me with accusations and keeping that situation charged. I did have a thought on something that didn't occur but could have occurred differently, where I was with family, and my mother was complaining about something, and she was complaining about something that was out of my control at me because I was involved in the situation, in almost this weird way to suggest, like, because I was a participant in the situation, that somehow I was now the owner of the outcome or what was occurring. So therefore I needed to take ownership over the failure of whatever occurred. And that made me feel very much charged and accused of something that was outside of my control. And that set my defenses up. And when we complain to somebody else about that, or maybe we're complaining directly about it to the person who maybe was at fault, we're not opening up those doors. So that curiosity is completely left off of the table. Um, so again, going back to the idea of like, hey, maybe I don't like how you responded in this situation or how you're acting in this situation. If I can first like try to come on board with the idea of why somebody might feel that way, or why they might have chosen this action, back to the mile, walking a mile in your shoes, that's going to give me at least some sort of feeling like you're not coming after me, my character. You're coming after understanding of my character.
Yeah, right. I really like that because I think, the more questions that are asked in communication, the more safety is created in that space. And I think that the more that safety is created in a space of communication, the more that people will open up and give you information that maybe they were hesitant of, or a little anxious to say, or didn't know the right words to say until you asked the question that you asked. So I think that it's just provides a really great playing field to have a really great game,
Mm.
in conversation, and to really help a relationship grow by just switching this one thing from stating opinions to being more curiosity focused. I think that a lot of couples in a repeat exercise of this will really find some really great information, that they weren't aware of, or didn't have the tools to talk about.
Yeah. And when it comes to giving that time and space, that breath and pause and asking questions, we're not allowing ourselves to exist in that snap response of, my thoughts are irrational and you're making me upset. Well, the person who's making you upset is yourself. You're choosing to get upset about something that somebody else, maybe was involved in. So they're not actually in charge of your emotions. You're in charge of your emotions. And when you're able to step back and have curiosity toward them, then you realize, okay, my emotional response is mine. It's not because of them. I am choosing this. So we give an opportunity to speak for the other person sometimes inside our own minds, being curious in that way. A lot of times we get ourselves in trouble because we just don't give ourselves that space.
Yeah, so true, my brother, so true. Well, this has been a good episode. I'm gonna have to cut it short, as like I said, I've got a house full of sickies. So
Yeah, I understand, brother. I'm curious as to how the best medicine is applied in this situation. Sometimes it sounds like What I love about kids is even when they're feeling sick, if everybody can just have a family day in the sick household, sometimes that's enough for kids. Man, I love that about kids. When I'm sick and I'm an adult, I'm just like, oh, leave me alone, everybody. And
Yeah.
really, everybody's just trying to be medicine to each other, and they succeed at it when they're young. It's a beautiful thing to witness. So I wish you the best as you navigate that today.
Yeah, there's a lot of cartoons and board games going on here this week. So, well, all right, brother. It was good talking with you. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you, listeners, for also taking the time. Hope you guys stay curious out there and got something from today. I'll put all the books we talked about and resources in the show notes for you. And make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, all that jazz. We sure do love hearing from you. So thanks for the support. Until next time, I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
And this is the ADH Dads.